to your question, which is why do I think you're an unbeliever, will be quite simple. It's just I don't know. I don't have access to what's going on in your head, really.
Okay.
So I can't know.
Okay.
It's a bit of a strange answer, I guess. I don't know why you want to find out what theists think of your beliefs, I guess.
No, it's just a curious question. Like I've heard a lot of Christians or theists in general hypothesize why some people don't believe, because, like, from the Christian perspective, I think a lot of Christians would say, well, the evidence is just so powerful. It's so amazing. Now, how can you not believe it?
So that's the kind of thing you find in, I guess, Romans 1. The people who suppress the truth in their unrighteousness, and they have no excuse because of the evidence. That's basically what Romans says. But you've done quite a lot of explanation of why you're an atheist, why you don't believe in Christianity, why you don't believe in God. And I think that should speak for itself, really, about what you're putting forward as your belief. I don't think I or anybody else apart from you really has much more to say.
Yeah, I agree.
I can't know what's going on with you.
Although a lot of people who might be watching right now haven't watched a lot of my videos and might not know. But yeah, I agree with you. I think if you watch my videos, you should know why I don't believe.
Yeah.
Are you a believer?
Yeah.
In Christianity?
Yeah.
Can you, like, I can say I don't believe because I think the evidence doesn't match the claim. It's not sufficient. That's the reason why I don't believe. What would be the reason why you do believe?
Well, I think that I don't know of a naturalistic explanation for something like the resurrection. I don't think that there is one.
Okay. So it's basically the opposite of my answer.
Yeah. So I guess you could assume both of us have approached this in something of a rational manner, and we've got pretty much the same set of evidence, and yet we've come to the completely contradictory conclusions.
Can I try something with you to get you to doubt?
Yeah, okay.
Is that all right with you?
Yeah, go ahead.
And earlier I talked about the flying man, but I want to do it a little differently this time.
All right.
So imagine someone really, truly believes that in history a man flew, and it was based on a cumulative case. And what would be the second best answer for why in history this man actually didn't fly? So we have a creed, we have martyrdom, we have 4 books written about the flying man and so forth.
Okay, so is the idea with the flying man thing that we have as much evidence as we have for Christianity?
Well, the same types of evidence. And so imagine a person really, truly believing that the flying man flew.
Right.
But let's say you and I have godlike knowledge that's false.
All right. Yeah.
What would be an explanation of how all that evidence could still exist, evidence in quotes, but we both know that, hey, it never happened in history? What would be an explanation for, let's say, the creed or the martyrdom or those 4 diaries?
I don't know if there'd be one. I think what the Christians are obviously proposing with Christianity is that God has done this.
Well, hang on. Let's stay off Christianity. Let's just talk about the flying man. Well, let's just take one thing. Let's say the creed. What would be an explanation for the man actually not flying? It's false in history, but we still have a creed that says he did. What would be an explanation?
When was this creed written, and who by?
It was written about 20 years after he flew, and it was written by a guy named Myron.
Okay, what did Myron know?
What would be
what situation was he in?
What would be a possible explanation for you if that's all you knew at this point? That a guy named Myron wrote that 20 years ago, a man flew in front of 500 people to 12 people, and lastly to him, Myron. Now, what would be an explanation for that, given that it's false, that he actually didn't fly, but we still have the creed?
I think one possible explanation would be bad intent on the part of Myron.
Right.
Another one might have been some kind of misinterpretation of what Myron really meant, and I think that's more
Right.
plausible.
Right.
I think the bad intent thing's pretty unlikely. It is possible.
Is it
And
unlikely
then,
that, okay, no, that's great. I love what your answer is, because you basically said, well, Myron could have lied.
yeah, he could have. I don't
Or,
think it's a very plausible idea, but yeah, he could have.
right. So that's one explanation. And a second explanation for that creed, I think you said, is that maybe what Myron said was interpreted differently, that maybe they really
Yeah.
didn't see the man fly, but maybe
So
just,
Myron might have been writing fiction.
or no, he
Or
could have, what he meant was, instead of, you seeing me right now on the screen, what Myron really meant was that people experienced the man flying, but it actually didn't see a guy
yeah,
fly.
something like that.
Yeah.
Some spiritual event and a metaphor, something like that. Yeah.
Okay, so we're both agreed that on that flying man, that those are possible explanations. Maybe not likely in your
Yeah.
view, but I guess
And I think
my next question for you is, what is more likely, a man actually flying in history unaided, or a guy lying?
it depends if you believe in the supernatural or not before you come to that.
Okay,
So,
great point.
if you
Let's
believe that
assume,
God exists and can make people fly, I don't think you have a meaningful way to actually evaluate the probability of that.
but I want
It's
to
definitely
ask.
plausible.
That's a good point. But let's assume you and I are both theists.
Right, right.
And we don't have any presuppositions against miracles. Would you still say it's more likely a man flew, or that a guy just lied about it?
I don't know if we could actually evaluate that probability.
Well, no,
I
we're
definitely be more
evaluating.
willing, seeing how many people I see lie all the time, and because I've never seen anyone fly, I would prefer to believe that it was lie.
Right, I'm the same way. And remember, we're both theists in this
Yeah,
hypothetical.
yeah,
But I agree with you. The prior probability, before we even see the evidence, before it's still, we have way more examples of people lying than we do examples of people flying unaided. Correct?
yeah, we do.
So wouldn't the explanation of someone be lying be better
It
than
would definitely be a better explanation. Yeah.
Okay. And how about the people, read texts and they reinterpret, they misinterpret all the time. Isn't that more likely than someone lying? I'm sorry, someone flying?
Yeah, the same thing would go
Okay.
with lying. Yeah.
Now let's shift this back to Christianity.
Ah, right.
Right. So you said one of the first things you said, 10 minutes ago, was that you can't think of any other explanation other than Jesus rose from the dead. On this one point, I want you to try to keep everything outside of this one point. On this one point of the creed, the very earliest source for Jesus' resurrection, written by Paul, on this one point, isn't it more likely that Paul lied, or what he said has been misinterpreted, over Jesus actually rising from the dead?
To put it this way, if all the evidence I had was that one fragment from 1 Corinthians 15, I would probably not be a Christian. No, I think it's a combination.
But that's not quite the question I asked you, though. The question I asked you is,
that's I'm agreeing with you that kind of I'm answering the question that no, it is not sufficient evidence.
Well, no, my question is, what would be I'll just call it naturalistic. What's the naturalistic explanation for the creed, other than that Jesus actually rose from the dead?
The naturalistic explanation for the creed on its own, it would probably have to be lying. I can't think of.
Or you mentioned another thing for the flying man.
That seems very unlikely, actually, given. I mean, I could get the text of it, but I don't see how that could be misinterpreted. Actually, maybe. Yeah, you've got a point.
Yeah, it's like what you said with the what you said about the flying man. You said the Myron who wrote the flying man creed could be lying, or what he wrote has been misinterpreted as actually seen someone fly. Maybe they just experienced or had this idea in their head that he flew, and maybe he really didn't.
Yeah,
and we're agreed that those same two things can be used for the creed in 1 Corinthians, right?
I think they could explain the creed there. Yeah.
Okay, we're on the same page. And so what I do is, I think this is the difference between me and you. I take that experiment which we just did and I just apply it to each claim one by one. Whereas I think at some point you would say, no, if you keep adding other pieces of evidence, eventually the probabilities flip. Am I right?
Yeah. I think that the combination of that with other things means that there aren't any good explanations. And when you see people who, when you find certain books that are defending the resurrection, they don't use the creed in that way either. They use it to illustrate what was a very early belief of Christians.
I was
rose from the
correct
dead.
how I like, I don't want to straw man you. Well,
No.
am I correct in how you evaluate it? You basically would agree with me on the creed, but if you keep adding stuff in, at some point the belief switch turns on.
I don't think it works.
Okay.
With all of them.
Now I want you to try to be me for like 60 seconds.
Okay.
And if you were to write out 100 pieces of claims or evidence of the resurrection, imagine you're me and looking at each one, just like we did with the creed, over and over again, but separately, one at a time. What do you think I would say to each piece of evidence? You're me now.
Yeah.
So let's take, you name one, besides the creed, name just one specific piece of evidence for the resurrection.
The preaching of the early Christians that there was a resurrection.
Okay.
Which is in itself shown by the creed.
Okay. So
yeah.
So you're talking about the Gospels?
Probably earlier than the Gospels. It depends what date you put on them.
Well, we only have Paul's writings in the Gospels for Jesus, for his. So you need to pick one. Pick something very specific.
So Paul's creed would tell you that the early Christians believed in the resurrection as well.
Okay. Yeah, we already dealt with that one.
Yeah. So I think that.
What's another one? What's another piece of evidence for the resurrection other than the creed?
The Gospels, and actually go with Acts. Go with the book of Acts.
Okay, be very specific, what in the book of Acts?
The preaching of the earliest Christians that there was an empty tomb.
Okay, so now pretend you're me and answer the question, what's the best explanation for the empty tomb from my perspective?
If you forget about,
or the claim of the tomb, I should say.
Right. I think the best explanation for that is that the tomb is empty.
Okay, but what would I say to that? And think of how I respond to the creed and the flying man. What would a guy like me say about the claim of an empty tomb?
You might not actually deny that there was an empty tomb. You might have a naturalistic explanation for that fact, though. And there are proposed naturalistic explanations for the empty tomb.
Okay, let's do it two ways. Let's say there was an empty tomb, and let's say there wasn't. How would I explain both?
I can't think of a way that you could explain there not being an empty tomb.
Think about the creed.
But
how did I answer for the creed? I said, or you actually answered, and I agreed with you. You said the author could be lying, or it could be a misinterpretation.
I don't think they could be lying about the empty tomb, because it's very easily falsifiable in the situation that they're in.
No, remember, you're being me.
Yeah.
So if in the book of Acts it talks about the tomb being empty, a guy like me would say what?
I don't know. I don't know if there's an explanation for that.
Okay, I appreciate your answer. That's an honest answer.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I'd say, but first of all, let me say this. When you say to a guy like me that you can't think of any other explanation other than Jesus rose from the dead, and then when I ask you, what would a guy like me say to certain claims, and you say, I don't know, that tells me that you haven't thought about it. You haven't thought deeply about other explanations. Is that fair? Is that fair?
I'm aware of the other explanations, but...
Okay. But you're not... Okay. If you're aware of other explanations for the tomb narrative, What are you aware of? Let's take it off me right now.
There's the idea of a stolen body.
Okay.
I think the main way that non-Christian scholarship would be going now
Okay,
is denying.
let's focus on that one. That's
Yeah.
not
So a
my
stolen
answer.
body would probably be. That's one I can think of.
That's not my answer, but let's focus in on that one. Now, remember when we talked about the flying man, what's more likely, lying or a man actually flying? What's more likely, a body being stolen out of a tomb or someone rising from the dead and walking out of the tomb?
The body being stolen. Yeah.
Right. It's more likely
Yeah, I
that
think that's probably more likely.
okay, so if we're just looking at the book of Acts and that one claim of a tomb being empty,
Yeah.
aren't we left with saying just on that one specific piece of evidence that it's more likely that the body was indeed stolen rather than a man rose from the dead and walked out?
Yeah, we are.
See, and now we could do this for the next 10 hours for each individual piece.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do it for 10 hours.
No, I don't either.
but my point is that cumulative case starts to crumble. Because you're always left, it's what the mathematicians call it as Bayes' theorem, but what you're really left with is asking the what's more likely question for each piece. And just because we have a whole bunch of pieces doesn't make it more likely. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you might have a lot of explanations, alternate explanations for each individual piece of evidence. And I definitely accept that there are plenty of those. I think where me and you would differ is that some of those is that there is no explanation that can actually fulfill all of those.
Well,
naturalistic one, at least.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, and this is where we disagree. If you agree with me, you're no longer a Christian. So if you want to stay a Christian, you want to disagree with me. But my answer would be that this is a story, mostly a fictional story, mostly based upon a real character in history, probably a traveling preacher, using Old Testament texts as a template for creating a narrative, the story, for this new figure. In other words, I'm saying Jesus represents a new Moses, which a lot of Christians agree with. They just think it's true.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Jesus is a new Elijah, a new Elisha. In fact, I think all Christians, many Christians who use the Old Testament as a proof text for Jesus as Messiah are admitting they're admitting that the New Testament is using the Old Testament, or that they're admitting that Jesus can be found within the text of the Old Testament, which is a big red flag that, hey guys, maybe the actual events didn't happen and that narratives just said it did to fulfill certain things. And sometimes when I say fulfill, it can also be a complete reversal of expectations. So Moses did this, but Jesus did this even better, or the rules were cast out the lepers outside the city. Jesus welcomed the lepers and so forth. Like it's brilliant writing, in my opinion, but it's a story mostly.
Okay.
So isn't that a very plausible explanation over a man actually rising from the dead?
I doubt that a lot of the parallels that you believe are there, I think are there. But yeah.
Okay, well, what we'll do is I'll contact the head office in Wichita, and they will send you out after we go off air. I'll send you I am now a non-Christian placard. But I'm kidding. No, I don't really care if you stay a Christian, leave Christianity. All I care about is that you think about these things, be able to steel man the other side. I hope I've steel manned your side, and be fair and kind to other people. I think we can agree on that.
What I've done here is actually denied Christianity. When you take each point of evidence on its own, yeah, there are definitely better explanations.
Yeah, and
I think would change is when you start putting these things together.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
Why do you live in Wichita?
It's a joke.
All right.
But yeah, this is exactly where there's a guy named Mike Winger who's an apologist on YouTube. I don't know if you know him.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to talk a lot privately via Facebook. Not a lot, but some. And I remember him saying exactly what you just said. It's like, yes, Doug, if you look at each piece of evidence, it can be doubted. You can say it's more likely that X happened rather than Y. However, when you put it all together, it's a cumulative case that's really strong. And this is the difference between Mike and me. This is the difference between you and me. I'm coming from the perspective that 1,000 bankrupt companies doesn't make one profitable one. And all these reasons, if they can be doubted, if they can't stand on their own merit, and you just have 1,000 of them, you still have nothing. And I know you disagree with that, and I understand you disagree with that, but that's where it's at.
Right.